Time, as distinguished from eternity, may be defined as that part of duration which is measured by the Bible. From the earliest date in the book of Genesis to the resurrection of the unjust at the end of the millennium, the period of about 7,000 years is measured off. Before the commencement of this great week of time, duration without beginning fills the past, and at the expiration of this period, unending duration opens before the people of God. Eternity is that word which embraces duration without beginning and without end. And that being whose existence comprehends eternity is he who only hath immortality, the King eternal, immortal, invisible, the only wise God. When it pleased this infinite being, he gave existence to our earth. Out of nothing, God created all things, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. This act of creation is that event which marks the commencement of the first week of time. He who could accomplish the whole work with one word chose rather to employ 6 days, and to accomplish the result by successive steps. Let us trace the footsteps of the Creator from the time when he laid the foundation of the earth until the close of the 6th day, when the heavens and the earth were finished, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. On the first day of time God created the heaven and the earth. The earth thus called into existence was without form and void, and total darkness covered the Creator's work. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God divided the light from the darkness, and called the one day and the other night. On the 2nd day of time God said, "Let there be a firmament." In the margin, the Hebrew word is expansion. In the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. The dry land had not yet appeared, consequently the earth was covered with water. As no atmosphere existed, thick vapors rested upon the face of the water, but the atmosphere now being called into existence by the word of the Creator, causing those elements to unite which compose the air we breathe, the fogs and vapors that had rested upon the bosom of the water were borne aloft by it. This atmosphere or expansion is called heaven. On the 3rd day of time God gathered the waters together and caused the dry land to appear. The gathering together of the waters God called seas. The dry land thus rescued from the waters he called earth. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And God saw that it was good. On the 4th day of time, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven, to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, and for seasons, and for days and years." And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. Light had been created on the 1st day of the week, and now on the 4th day he causes the sun and moon to appear as light-bearers, and places the light under their rule. And they continue unto this day according to his ordinances, for all are his servants. Such was the work of the 4th day, and the great architect, surveying what he had wrought, pronounced it good. On the 5th day of time God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. On the 6th day of time God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind. And God saw that it was good. Thus the earth, having been fitted for the purpose, was filled with every order of living creature, while the air and waters teemed with animal existence. To complete this noble work of creation, God next provides a ruler, the representative of himself, and places all in subjection under him. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made the Lord God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food, the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Last of all, God created Eve, the mother of all living. The work of the Creator was now complete. The heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, and God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Adam and Eve were in paradise. The tree of life bloomed on earth. Sin had not entered our world, and death was not here, for there was no sin. The morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Thus ended the 6th day. The work of the Creator was finished, but the first week of time was not yet completed. Each of the 6 days had been distinguished by the Creator's work upon it, but the 7th was rendered memorable in a very different manner. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. In yet stronger language it is written, "On the 7th day he rested and was refreshed." Thus the 7th day of the week became the rest day of the Lord. How remarkable is this fact! The everlasting God, the Lord, the Creator of the ends of the earth, fainteth not, neither is weary. He needed no rest, and yet it is written, "On the 7th day he rested and was refreshed." Why does not the record simply state the cessation of the Creator's work? Why did he at the close of that work employ a day in rest? The answer will be learned from the next verse. He was laying the foundation of a divine institution, the memorial of his own great work. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. The 4th commandment states the same fact. He rested the 7th day, wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. The blessing and sanctification of the 7th day were because that God had rested upon it. His resting upon it, then, was to lay the foundation for blessing and sanctifying the day. His being refreshed with this rest implies that he delighted in the act which laid the foundation for the memorial of his great work. The second act of the Creator in instituting this memorial was to place his blessing upon the day of his rest. Thenceforward it was the blessed rest day of the Lord. A third act completes the sacred institution. The day already blessed of God is now, last of all, sanctified or hallowed by him. To sanctify is to separate, set apart, or appoint to a holy, sacred, or religious use. To hallow is to make holy, to consecrate, to set apart for a holy or a religious use. The time when these 3 acts were performed is worthy of especial notice. The first act was that of rest. This took place on the 7th day, for the day was employed in rest. The second and third acts took place when the 7th day was past. God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work. Hence, it was on the first day of the 2nd week of time that God blessed the 7th day and set it apart to a holy use. The blessing and sanctification of the 7th day, therefore, relate not to the first 7th day of time, but to the 7th day of the week for time to come, in memory of God's rest on that day from the work of creation. With the beginning of time, God began to count days, giving to each an ordinal number for its name. 7 different days receive as many different names. In memory of that which he did on the last of these days, he sets that apart by name to a holy use. This act gave existence to weeks or periods of 7 days. For with the 7th day he ceased to count, and by the divine appointment of that day to a holy use in memory of his rest thereon, he causes man to begin the count of a new week so soon as the first 7th day had ceased. And as God has been pleased to give man in all but 7 different days, and has given to each one of these days a name which indicates its exact place in the week, his act of setting apart one of these by name, which act created weeks and gave man the Sabbath, can never, except by sophistry, be made to relate to any indefinite or uncertain day. The days of the week are measured off by revolution of our earth on its axis, and hence our 7th day as such can come only to dwellers on this globe. To Adam and Eve, therefore, as inhabitants of this earth, and not to the inhabitants of some other world, were the days of the week given to use. Hence, when God set apart one of these days to a holy use in memory of his own rest on that day of the week, the very essence of the act consisted in his telling Adam that this day should be used only for sacred purposes. Adam was then in the garden of God, placed there by the Creator to dress it and to keep it. He was also commissioned of God to subdue the earth. When therefore the rest day of the Lord should return from week to week, all this secular employment, however proper in itself, must be laid aside, and the day observed in memory of the Creator's rest. Dr. Twiss quotes Martin Luther thus, quote, "And Martin Luther professeth as much," Tome 6, in Genesis 2, verse 3. Quote, "It follows from hence, saith he, that if Adam had stood in his innocency, yet he should have kept the 7th day holy, that is, on that day he should have taught his children and children's children what was the will of God and wherein his worship did consist. He should have praised God, given thanks, and offered. On other days he should have tilled his ground, looked to his cattle." Close quote. The Hebrew verb kadesh, here rendered sanctified and in the 4th commandment rendered hallowed, is defined by Gesenius, quote, "to pronounce holy, to sanctify, to institute any holy thing, to appoint." Close quote. It is repeatedly used in the Old Testament for a public appointment or proclamation. Thus, when the cities of refuge were set apart in Israel, it is written, "They appointed," and in the margin the Hebrew word sanctified, "Kedesh in Galilee in Mount Naphtali, and Shechem in Mount Ephraim," etc. This sanctification or appointment of the cities of refuge was by a public announcement to Israel that these cities were set apart for that purpose. This verb is also used for the appointment of a public fast, and for the gathering of a solemn assembly. Thus it is written, "Sanctify," i.e., appoint, "ye a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land into the house of the Lord your God. Blow the trumpet in Zion, sanctify," i.e., appoint, "a fast, call a solemn assembly." And Jehu said, "Proclaim," and in the margin the Hebrew says sanctify, "a solemn assembly for Baal." This appointment for Baal was so public that all the worshippers of Baal in all Israel were gathered together. These fasts and solemn assemblies were sanctified or set apart by a public appointment or proclamation of the fact. When therefore God set apart the 7th day to a holy use, it was necessary that he should state that fact to those who had the days of the week to use. Without such announcement, the day could not be set apart from the others. But the most striking illustration of the meaning of this word may be found in the record of the sanctification of Mount Sinai. When God was about to speak the 10 Commandments in the hearing of all Israel, he sent Moses down from the top of Mount Sinai to restrain the people from touching the mount. And Moses said unto the Lord, The people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou chargest us, saying, Set bounds about the mount, and sanctify it. Turning back to the verse where God gave this charge to Moses, we read, And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourselves, that you go not up into the mount, or touch the border of it. Hence, to sanctify the mount was to command the people not to touch even the border of it, for God was about to descend in majesty upon it. In other words, to sanctify or set apart to a holy use Mount Sinai was to tell the people that God would have them treat the mountain as sacred to himself. And thus also to sanctify the rest day of the Lord was to tell Adam that he should treat the day as holy to the Lord. The declaration, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, is not indeed a commandment for the observance of that day, but it is the record that such a precept was given to Adam. For how could the Creator set apart to a holy use the day of his rest, when those who were to use the day knew nothing of his will in the case? Let those answer who are able. This view of the record in Genesis we shall find to be sustained by all the testimony in the Bible relative to the rest day of the Lord. The facts which we have examined are the basis of the fourth commandment. Thus spake the great lawgiver from the summit of the flaming mount, Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. The seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. The term Sabbath is transferred from the Hebrew language and signifies rest. The command, Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, is therefore exactly equivalent to saying, Remember the rest day to keep it holy. The explanation which follows sustains this statement. The seventh day is the Sabbath or rest day of the Lord thy God. The origin of this rest day is given in these words, For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. That which is enjoined in the fourth commandment is to keep holy the rest day of the Lord. And this is defined to be the day on which he rested from the work of creation. Moreover, the fourth commandment calls the seventh day the Sabbath day at the time when God blessed and hallowed that day. Therefore, the Sabbath is an institution dating from the foundation of the world.